Hello, we continue with the Robles Travel, chapter 38, and we have been talking about this idea of having a narrow focus that happens to all of us sometimes, and we can only concentrate on the things we have right inside the front of us instead of considering the whole picture or seeing the whole scene that we are trying to solve. So we only focus on one thing, one object, one subject, one matter, and we forget about the rest. And that is, if you remember from the last chapter, what the doctor called throwing the baby with the bath water. And in this case that we are trying to solve or to reveal here in these chapters, we have been talking about the realm of the spirit or the spirituality or God, or should God be considered in this case in psychiatry, as a psychiatrist, the doctor, or in psychotherapy, or even for growing, just for grow. Should we consider God? Should we not? And that kind of thing. And if you remember, we talked about a little bit about religion in the previous chapter, and we are now focusing a little bit more on the scientific part of this matter. However, we will talk about religion too, so these two chapters are kind of mixed. And this is the last chapter before we continue with the next section, which is called grace, that we will talk about later. So yes, sometimes we focus, as it is in the case of, in general, from a scientific perspective, this tunnel vision that the doctor calls is because science is based on the premises of experience, having experience, and having a methodology to study the thing we want to talk about, or we want to solve, in this case about God, the mystery of God, we could say. And it's also based in repeatable experiences and observation, and every experience that we have should be repeatable by others in order for this experience to be, or this thing that we are studying can be verified time after time. Under the same conditions, you have the same results. And also, scientists look for a way to measure everything, these experiences. Every time you have the same conditions, you should have the same results and the same measures. And that should be, that is actually the way scientific or scientists study things. And the doctor mentions here an interesting point, or a point to be considered right now, which is that these measures, or these metrics, we shall call them, the way of understanding the results from certain experiences, become this quote-unquote God, or the idol for the scientist. So in the case of religion, they have God, and God is never questioned. And in this case, metrics are not to be questioned, or are the ones to be looked for from the scientific perspective. But what happens when things cannot be measured, like with the intangibles, like God, like perception, like personal experience of something, I mean in the body, or thinking, things that cannot be really measured, or consciousness even. What happens with those topics? And remember, this was written almost 50 years ago, and the doctor says these topics are generally unworthy for the scientific perspective to be studied, because they cannot be measured, so they shouldn't be studied, or they are disregarded or discarded by scientists. The good news is that we now know that scientists have been opening a little bit more their minds, and they with, of course, the advancements of technology and new tools and new methods of studying things, measuring also, again, measuring the intangibles that things we used to consider intangibles, and now there are some other ways to talk about those things and to study them. It has been advancing towards the direction of being a little bit more open to these topics. And even, for example, it comes to mind, Einstein talked about God too in the end, or at the last years of his career. So scientists have been open into the idea that there is something greater than all of us individuals. But anyway, I'm diverging from the main topic here. And another thing that science has ignored, we could say, in the past as an error, is the paradoxes. When something is paradoxical, or used to be paradoxical, I don't know, 200 years ago, 100 years ago, that topic would be discarded, or say it's a mistake, or it's an error, or it's something that we cannot really measure, so it's no longer studied. However, the doctor mentions that the mysticists, for example, through millennia, have been talking about things that cannot be measured, are intangible, things that cannot be fully comprehended, that we could say some kind of mystery there is around the earth. And they would talk, even sometimes express ideas in the terms of paradoxes. For example, it comes now to mind from Zen Buddhism. There are many, I don't recall the name of them, of these mysteries that you say as a poem or as some kind of puzzle for the students to figure out, like they wanna, if a tree falls in the middle of the wood and nobody's there to listen to the tree falling, is it really falling, and those kind of things that didn't actually had a solution per se, but they were made for us, or the students at the time, the students of this type of religion, to think about different matters, even if they didn't have a solution. But that is quite unscientific because it's not measurable, right? So what happens with these paradoxes, or these things that sometimes come out of the ordinary, and there are, for example, miracles or some remissions of problems in health. I don't know, it comes to mind sudden remissions of cancer patients, or those kind of things that we see sometimes that happen, and it's just disregarded as something exceptional that has happened. And what the doctor says here is that maybe there is some way to reconcile religion and science. In these cases, these edge cases, we could say, these exceptional cases, they could be studied by them, religion and also science. And nowadays it's more common that sometimes people want to know the truth of something, and they start to analyze that and to study that, what has happened in this case that seems to be exceptional, seems to be a miracle. So there are, again, more tools, more technology, more knowledge about things nowadays, for example, quantum physics, and so many things that can help us understand a little bit better our world, even the intangibles. However, the doctor mentions it tends to, or at least at this time, apparently religion only said this is an act of God and that's it. Nobody questions it, nobody analyzes the things, nobody understands what's going on, but it's God did this and we should say nothing about that, right? So the doctor perspective, finally, closing this section, is, I would say, it's inconclusive, or at least he doesn't say yes, God should be included in therapy, and having a belief in God is good for you, or no, you shouldn't believe in God because that's psychopathology. Not from that perspective, but he said that from himself, actually, he said when he started practicing as a psychiatrist, he didn't believe in God. He didn't believe, he didn't believe in miracles. He said he thought that miracles didn't exist, couldn't exist. However, in his own path of growing and questioning his own assumptions, he started thinking, what if I'm wrong about this? What if my assumptions about miracles non-existent are actually an error or are a wrong perception from my side? So he started being more open to the idea that there could be miracles somewhere. And by being more open, he started to see more miracles in his own practice. And he also says, we sometimes think of miracles and we want to find miracles of biblical proportions, we could say, or from the sacred text of religions, if you will. These kind of things like parting the waters in the middle of the sea, or burning bushes, those kind of things. And that doesn't have to be the case in order to be considered a miracle, according to the doctor. You can see this miracle of being alive, or in things, little things in life that happen and that make you think there is something greater than just us individuals, and that as individuals, as a collective, are more than the sum of each one of us. And he mentions here an article, a note from an article that I will leave the name of the people and the article and everything he cites here. And this article talks about the self-realization, and it says self-realization is born and mature in a distinctive kind of awareness. So meaning when we become to be remember the Maslow pyramid of self-realization is at the top of this pyramid, is when we are growing and we are getting to a certain state of consciousness, of mind, where we can become our best self. Is just very in a very short term of that. And this self-realization has been called, all is this mentioned in this note, that self-realization has been called by different people, or mystics, or scientists, and even here Maslow called this self-realization of being cognition, and others talked about the perception of divinity, others said cosmic consciousness, others said simply miracles. So these ways of expressing self-realization have been like that through the ages, or through time. And one little not paragraph, one little sentence that caught my attention here in this article that he mentions is that perception of the miraculous requires no faith or assumptions. Meaning that if we have this preconception of things, if we have these previous ideas and we have our baggage, our mind is like narrow and not open to all the possibilities, and we assume we have our assumptions, we have our ideas on how things should turn or how it should be, we will not be able to perceive these miracles. And I understand if you're thinking that's Google. I sometimes also think about that, and sometimes I also think about the opposite. If you have experienced something that you can call miraculous in your life, you might understand this if you're a scientist from this woo perspective. But if you are more like a scientist, you will understand this from the quantum perspective. Actually, when I was telling this about the doctor being open to new possibilities, he started seeing these things. It reminded me a lot of this. And he actually mentioned something here about this experiment of that's widely known in quantum physics about how a particle, yes, it could be a wave or a particle, an electron that passes through a certain, what's the name in English? Rendija en español, in Spanish, but I can't seem to find the word in English. But through different holes, you can shoot an electron through different holes, and it depends on where you are expecting it. It will appear as a particle or as a wave, and that is what many people use to explain that quantum physics is about the point where we put our observance or our focus on that will be projected in the reality of things. So anyways, you might even not be completely I don't know if married is the word, but married with this idea, or if you may not like this idea either. But there are several studies, according to science, that have proved that. So if you ask me, I'm not sure about anything of that. But somehow I can understand that there are miracles every day. And again, the doctor says that there is something to be, and he will explain in the next section some things that he has lived through practice about these little miracles, we could say. They don't have to be, again, of biblical proportions. But, and there is a warning here, a but. And that is why I also say about this, we tend to call it woo-woo. These kind of things that you could say, or they are nonsense, or they're just bullshit. But that happens also, and we have to always keep our critical mind with us. And we have to be aware that there might be, and we have to approach also these kind of topics with our skeptical mind, with a healthy skeptical mind, as much as we can possibly do it. Because there are also, the doctor doesn't mention this word, but it came to mind to me. There are many charlatans, we could say, many people that will talk about things they don't fully understand, or sometimes they think they do understand, or but they have not been completely proven or are poorly tested, as the doctor says. So yes, every time we have these kind of conversations, we should be able to analyze things and not just say, oh, it's an act of God and that's it, or no, that's completely unverifiable and it's unworthy of study, for example. And of course, it will depend on your own preference if you want to follow that lead or not, if you want to study that or not. But you should always be curious, but skeptical at the same time. I mean, this is about everything in life, almost. So yeah, there are no simple answers here. Again, I kind of knew, and actually, as I have read the book before, I knew the doctor wouldn't give no, you shouldn't, because remember the first question was, should we believe in God after we walked out from the therapy, or after we grow up or mature in our own being, or updating our maps of the world? Should we exclude God from our maps, or should we include it, him or her or them? So that is for you to say. Sometimes it could be beneficial for you to, if you don't believe in God, to maybe ask yourself why is that you don't believe, or try to get rid of the assumptions and see what happens. Again, approaching with a curious mind, but skeptical at the same time. And or if you believe that God is the responsible for everything in life, even your own life and your own actions, maybe you should consider, what if it's not like that? If maybe God is not that involved as you thought he, she, them are. And or several goddesses or goddesses, I don't know, those kind of things. Some people prefer to call it the universe, or however you like it. Anyway, so there are no simple answers, and it's for us to decide, maybe with the company of a therapist, or however we want. And I wanted to connect the different sections right now as we are entering into grace and the next chapter. That something I already mentioned, but I wanted to make it more explicit, is that the doctor was going himself through this process of growing, as we have been telling, updating his map, questioning his own beliefs and assumptions. That is part of growing. We mentioned from the first section of the book, discipline, right? Remember? So we have been also side by side understanding their own the growing part from the doctor himself, and he's sharing with us through his book these experiences of himself and others, of course. So yeah, it's like kind of a little bit of the recollection from the last sections. And I think we have a lot to, well, at least for me, I have a lot of processes still about this section, and I'm looking forward to know what more mysteries will bring us with the next section, which is the last one of the book, called Grace. So see you next Sunday, and I hope you are reading the book. And if you want to comment, if you want to input your own ideas or things you have been growing up with the book too, I hope you can do so. And have a great week and see you next Sunday. Bye bye.
This is Between the Lines. Today, we dissect the road less traveled. Stay tuned for Ulua's next episode.